The always same mistakes of leadership. No worries. This podcast is not going to be one of the episodes where I raise my finger and tell you, oh, just pointing here and there, wrong. This is not what we're going to do here. First, good news. And someone else reminded me of that after the last episode. Yes, we now have more than 10,000 people listening to this podcast or listened to the podcast in the past. More than 10,000 times in English or the German version, more than 10,000 times people gave me their time listening to this podcast. I have to say I'm incredibly proud of that and I'm incredibly thankful. What I especially like is that more and more people contact me via email or via social media, and the amount of hate messages go down significantly, while at the same time more and more people like to discuss great contact. Some people book me for trainings and coachings and keynotes. That's awesome as well. But having the discussion about sustainable leadership, that is the most important part of this podcast, and that is going tremendously well. So thank you very much for more than 10,000 people listening to me in English or German. We actually now already have more than 11,000 people. So it is going very well, and fingers crossed it's going to stay that way. So feel free to recommend this podcast to family, friends, colleagues, etc. Post it on social media, whatever you like. I'm very helpful. I'm very thankful for all the support you gave me in the past. But now we are talking about leadership. As I said, the always same errors and mistakes of leadership. The question at the moment is, and I'm talking about a specific ad campaign which just recently, meaning today, started in the UK. It's an ad campaign about the future of work after COVID-19. And once more, we see the same mistake of leaders, not only in politics, but also in free enterprise and in your private life. The always same mistakes happen over and over again. And that is something no one expected, including me. I didn't expect that I have to address the same issues which I addressed in 1999 or 2001 or 2009 or 2015 again in 2020. So the 2020 vision seems to be a bit blurred, as it seems. The question is, where does your freedom of speech end as a leader? And that is a question which a couple of people asked me via email or via social media. The first and general rule you have to apply here is freedom of speech does not mean freedom of repercussion. So as soon as you say something, people have the right to comment on what you said. When you say, I want to say something, but please don't comment on it because it is as it is, then you are unsuitable as a leader and you already disqualified yourself. Personally and sustainably, but in the wrong direction sustainably, because what you actually say is when I say something, no other comment will be taken into consideration. That is something which normally dictators would say, or maybe kings and queens in the Middle Ages said that. Lex regis, as someone who speaks Latin, and by the way, I didn't have Latin lessons, I only do a couple of words from that. Lex regis, the law of the king. So you say something, people have to follow. Bad news, these times are over. And the first thing people miss, and especially young people miss, is that their leadership area miss to make a clear point about where we are on the political map. So what does it mean to be on the what does it mean to make a clear point about where you are on the political map? Well, it simply means that people miss that you always talk about values, but suddenly you become very morally flexible as soon as there's a financial benefit in for you. I'll just give you an example. In one organization, there was an example where someone who was in a training program said that in his opinion, because it was a male person saying, and in his opinion, they have too many immigrants in the company and that brings down the wages, so they should have less immigrants. That person was fired on the spot. And by the way, that's exactly the right decision, because you can't make discriminatory and racist comments and expect that your employer keeps you. Unfortunately, and by the way, that happened about 3 months ago. Unfortunately, just a couple of weeks after, someone from senior management said that, well, immigration is a problem and that the people with a background in immigration have hard times to integrate within the organization, and most issues they have in HR are with immigrants. So it obviously is an immigration problem. So maybe they should rethink their hiring techniques and if they really should still hire immigrants. That is an even more unacceptable and more racist statement. And guess what? That person had a talk with the CEO. After that, the person apologized and the person stayed exactly where the person is. So nothing else than a lukewarm apology. And when you read the email of the apology which was sent to me, and by the way, when people send emails from inside their organization to me as an external person, it means they don't see any other way to get help and a public voice except sending it to someone outside the company, which, by the way, is not even allowed, because of course these emails are internal, but they say, I don't give a damn anymore. When it comes to racism, we need to make it heard. We need to make the wrongdoing heard and hope that behavior will change. Well, the lukewarm behavior read like a statement, obviously, the legal department together with the HR department wrote. So you don't really make an apology, you don't really admit wrongdoing, so no one can sue you. You just say, oh, I just want to admit that maybe some people perceived it the wrong way, and I'm very sorry when I hurt people's feelings, but I was never racist, I never said something wrong. Look, when you want to apologize for something, you can't apologize by saying you didn't do anything wrong. You can't make a racist statement and then in your apology say you weren't racist. You can't make a homophobic, anti-Semitic, racist, misogynist statement and at the end say you weren't homophobic, racist, anti-Semitic or misogynist. People will laugh at you and no one will follow you in the future. Unless you apologize and you say, look, what I said was perceived as racist because in the context I see it right now, it probably was racist. I am very sorry. There is no excuse for that. And then, of course, you should show a personal consequence. So, for example, donate a reasonable amount of money in relation to your income to a charity which helps to protect racism, do anti-racism training, etc., etc. So show proper consequences. But the problem is, and we have major problems here, people say they don't want extreme politics, especially, of course, not left-wing extreme politics, because that always means higher taxation. But they also don't want far right-wing politics. But as soon as something like that happens, especially very old businesses tend not to show any consequences. And afterwards, you wonder why the costs for recruiting go up, why you have to pay external talent way more to join your workforce, and why other players on the market get way easier access to talent. The reason is because they walk the talk and you don't. There are major problems, and three main problems are, first, leadership knows everything better. And now I'm referring to an ad campaign which just today started. And the ad campaign, maybe some of you, especially when you are in the UK, you will have seen it. And when I saw that in the first place, I thought it is satire, but it was not satire. I'm going to describe the poster, just one of them. You see a ballerina, someone who obviously works in the artistic area and the creative area. So a ballerina just putting on her special shoes for doing what ballerinas do, which is probably ballet. And then it says, besides the person just putting on their special ballerina shoes, Fatima's next job could be in cyber. She just doesn't know it yet. Rethink, reskill, reboot. Cyber first. HM government. I looked at that and honestly thought, this is satire. And when I click on the post, some comedian will say, this is how the future looks like, blah, blah, blah. Everything is wrong with that, but it didn't really happen. No, it is an official government campaign. And they are serious with that. The statement which you send out is that the arts aren't worth much. It's nice to have, but not really what some people might call a proper job. And of course, immediately, because we know that Brits have a great sense of humor, the internet went to town and held the government to account. So immediately, someone took a picture of Dominic Cummings, and the text beside Dominic Cummings said, Dom's next job could be in laundry. He just doesn't know it yet. Investigate, incriminate, incarcerate. Her Majesty's Prison and Probation Service. And immediately conservatives said that is unacceptable. How can you be so offensive? Well, who started it first? I'll just give you another example. There's another poster of Boris Johnson where it says, Boris' next job could be working for a Russian oligarch and he knows it, HM government. Or the one for Dido Harding, where you have Dido Harding. Dido's next job shouldn't be in cyber or healthcare, but they'll give it to her anyway. No ability, no skill, no problem. Cyber first, HM government. you see the answer is very creative and immediately got traction amongst the people in society, because people do not accept what's happening right now. And this is not even a new problem. So when we get to the problem, and then of course talk about how to do it better, problem number one, leadership always knows it better. Older people tell the younger generation everything you do is wrong. And by the way, this happens from one generation to the next one. My grandparents told my parents, oh, we worked hard in factories and we had physical labor and we feel it, and you feel better when you work physically, and now you start and you want to study. Why do you do that? That takes so many years and is not even sure if you get a job with that. And my mother was told by her parents, oh, well, you are very qualified and you have the right recommendation to go to uni, but no, just go for vocational training. We don't send you to university, and then you will marry and have children. This follows people for life. Then my parents told me what is a proper job, and the proper job for them was you get your training, you go to university, then you are employed somewhere and you work for them. And with employment, because I come from a family, they all work for the state. Employment for them means you work for the state because it's such a safe job. And in the beginning, my first training at university was to become a teacher. In Germany, when you are a teacher, you work for the state. You get a lifelong assignment. It's probably the safest job in the whole country. And after my first 6 months of practicing as a teacher, not even after uni, fortunately, they put these practice tests at a very early stage now during studies, I just realized I love teaching, but I don't want to work for the state because they are so unbelievably slow and inefficient. So I was fascinated by my student job for GlaxoSmithKline and Free Enterprise, and I went straight there, and they gave me an opportunity, which I'm always thankful for. From there, I went for an American company, which gave me tremendous career chances because I brought in results. They were very numbers-based, which was not always great, but it gave me career options at a very young age that no one else probably would have given you. That is the big advantage of American companies. When you're able to do it, you're just allowed to do it. But what we have right here is, again, the older generation says, oh, it is just you telling what's right or wrong. What your goals are is irrelevant to us. How you feel is irrelevant to us. And what your idea of life is irrelevant to us. One of my friends, and for GDPR reasons I have to abbreviate it here, Harry M., you will find him on my timeline. Harry M., who had a corporate career, just today posted he could make way more money with his corporate career, but he deliberately left it. He works as a DJ and drag performer in pubs in the UK in the creative industry, and he is happier than ever before, although he has way less money. So when you want to tell them it's all wrong, and by the way, where do you think you are going to spend your time once COVID-19 is over? And when we just check the facts, the Secretary of Science, who is a very reliable source in Germany, Mrs. Karliczek, says that from mid of next year at the latest, they start with a vaccination in Germany. Not with a trial, but with a proper vaccination. So we're about 6 to 8 months ahead of the solution of this crisis. Of course, we will need time to recover afterwards, but let's face it, we are all whining around, oh, such a hard time, such a hard time. At my age, my grandparents went through a world war, growing up in a bombed-away country. And by the way, bombing Nazis is the exact right way to do, but my parents were on the other side. We were a resistance-fighting family. My grandfather survived 7 years, first Nazi prison, then concentration camp Buchenwald. So what am I complaining about? And still, at the end of the crisis, you will get back to your jobs. Of course, the working world will be a different one. We will have more remote work. So when we look into the facts here, Microsoft just has a new guideline in place. Less than 50% remote work are always okay. More have to be agreed with the management, which in my opinion is a smart idea, because when COVID-19 happened, we quickly went for remote work. But we also figured out what does not work when you do it remotely. And especially when I now see for 2 months now, my seminars, workshops on site resumed again. And when you see virtual, or better to say remote events compared to on-site events, let's face it, the on-site event have a benefit. If it's the networking part, if it's the social part, but something else happens in that room compared to just sitting at home with your notebook. So I think we will go for hybrid models after this. And by the way, getting back to the main point, When you come back from work, no matter if it's remote work or when it is work on site in a corporate building, where do you spend your time to relax? You will go to a comedy show, you will go to performances, you will go to museums. So when we now cut off talent from the artistic industry and we tell them it is not worth doing it, we might suffer from a loss of culture where we will need decades to recover from. Because not only the people who are in there now will leave and do something else, many of them will not return. And many people won't even go for that option at university or in any kind of other education option because they say, oh, I saw what happened there, maybe I should do something else. A loss of culture is something that when you look into history, no society ever survived. A loss of culture has way more severe long-term consequences than a loss of money or loss of financial opportunities or loss of the economy. We always recovered from that. But a loss of culture, going for less culture or going for only one culture, I don't want to refer to the darkest times of Germany, but a loss of culture was one part of the downfall. A loss of culture is something we will not recover from. And of course, instead of saying, sorry, I'm wrong, which the UK government maybe should do so with that campaign now, immediately you get an excuse, not even an apology. You get a cheap excuse. Oh, we created that ad campaign before, but now we just put it to public. Listen, when you make an ad campaign and months or even years later you put it out there, you have to recheck if it is still appropriate. Just imagine if comedians who were comedians in the 60s and 70s would say, oh, I did the jokes in the 60s, no one was offended back then. People realize that there is a change in society. So maybe senior leadership should do so as well. And by the way, I gave you the same example from Real World Free Enterprise, where a trainee was fired for racist comments, but senior management gave a legal department and HR department written lukewarm excuse for even worse wrongdoing. That is the end of the generation contract we're facing. The generation contract we have is that we always, with all the disagreements we have, we always take care of each other. We might have different ideas, and they differ from left to right in a reasonable scale of political ideas, which of course does not mean that we accept far left-wing nor far right-wing ideas. But overall, we agree that we all take care of each other. And when we now say, the old people again tell, and by the way, I meanwhile, I'm older than 40, so I belong to what most people would see as the older generation right now. I would not dare to tell a young person, that's right, that's wrong, and it's all your fault, because I know which consequences that has for a young person's being and for a young person's life. They're not going to forgive us these mistakes, which we do right now. And we will face decades of challenges if we don't do it right now, if we don't do it the right way right now. So how do we do it better? Step number 1. Leadership has a very clear statement about where they stand, not only about values, but also on the political map. And when someone is doing something wrong, you show consequences. And the same laws apply to the same people, which means the same consequences apply for the same people. Not like, by the way, it is irrelevant. If someone is from your personal network or your best buddy or a mate or someone you helped you in your career, when you fire someone for a certain wrongdoing, you can't say when someone is in a more senior position, a worse wrongdoing has less consequences. You disqualify yourself as a leader and you remove your own legitimization that people even will remotely consider to follow you. So leadership must make a very clear statement. Step number 2, employees must be updated is where we are. And by the way, when you are transparent about consequences, these consequences must happen on all the areas, on all the different levels of the hierarchy pyramid, from the youngest trainees to senior management to board level. Because the old excuse that you say, oh, you all have to take a pay cut and there will be no bonuses this year. Oh, by the way, that does not apply to senior leadership because we can't cut wages there. If we cut wages there, we don't get good people there. Look, when you are financially not prepared I'm only referring to business continuity and catastrophe recovery scenarios, which, by the way, are job of senior management. This senior management brought you into the situation that you are not prepared for what happens right now. So don't tell me that they are so great, because they're obviously not. Otherwise, you wouldn't be unprepared right now. So when there is a pay cut, there's a pay cut on all levels. And by the way, just today, British Airways removed their CEO due to the crisis, which of course is way too late. But when you see how British Airways is doing, they have to restructure all levels of the income pyramid, all levels of the hierarchical pyramid, all levels of people working for them, not only cutting at the lower level and giving bonuses to top level. So be transparent about what is expected to happen, but again, you must be congruent. So people see that there is a certain logic behind what you do, and that logic hits all different areas of your organization. When you exclude a certain area, there must be a reason for that. I just give you one example. So for example, one organization, a client of us, they said, you're all on furlough except the sales team. The sales team only is on 20% furlough because they need to sell even better now. And everyone understood that. That is how you do. This is how you put transparency into an organization. And by the way, and that is step number 1, make a very clear statement where you are. Step number 2, show transparency. And step number 3, numbers will not be the only criteria here. And when you now say, oh, but numbers are important, I agree. No one says numbers are not important. But let's face it, and I am quoting Harvard Business Review here, they had an own issue, an own edition, which for 1 month only dealt with the topic. And I still remember the headline on the main page of the magazine. It says, do metrics undermine your business? And then it talks about how managers and leaders mix up numbers with strategy, because that's something different. Numbers are not strategy. Numbers are important, but of course you have to see what is the human side of your decision as well. What is the effect on your employer brand? What are the mid and long-term damages? Which short-term problems do we have to fix, but which of them might lead to even worse problems in the future? So we're only delaying the problem instead of really solving it. Because one thing we cannot risk as leaders, and that is the end of the generations contract we have right now. And no matter how hard we disagree on different aspects, so far we always made it happen that we agreed on, after all, we all take care of each other. And I hope we will be able to do so in the future. I wish you all the best implementing this in your organization. And for this week, I only have one thing left to say at the end of this podcast, and that's the line which I say every week. Thank you very much for your time.